Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Welcome to another inspiring episode of the Core Women Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Alanna Kaivalya, a best-selling author and expert in mythology, spirituality, and psychology. With a global network of over 30,000 members, Alanna is the host of the Spiritual Leadership Podcast, originally launched in 2005. She holds a doctorate in mythological studies with an emphasis in depth psychology and has served on the board of the Carl Jung Foundation. We will also be talking about her new book, The Way of the Satisfied Woman, Reclaiming Feminine Power, which is a groundbreaking exploration into the essence of feminine strength and fulfillment. Welcome, Dr. Alanna.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm happy to speak with you today.
I am so excited to dive into this. But before we get into your professional journey, if you could describe it in one word to this point, what would that word be and why?
Well, I have a word, but it has a bit of a caveat. So I would say that my professional journey up until recently, the word would have been dissatisfied, but now satisfied. And that's really the whole point of the book and the movement.
Okay, tell us more about that evolution, please.
Yes, absolutely. So I imagine that, like many listeners here on the podcast, as a woman in this day and age, one who has a career, is smart, is capable, I was raised with the narrative that we need to be everything for ourselves and everyone else at all times. We also need to be better at it than everyone else. We need to work harder. We need to achieve more. And we still need to come home and do everything at home that was expected of us 50 to 100 years ago. So there's a lot of pressure for women. And one of the things that I certainly fell prey to in terms of this narrative as a young woman was that I needed to fulfill this American ideal of both individuality and success. And that meant success at all costs, and that meant doing it by myself. And so at the age of 23, I even changed my last name to Kaivalya, which is what it is. And that actually is a Sanskrit word that means the power of aloneness. So I set out to prove to the world that I could do everything all by myself. I'm a woman, hear me roar, let me get it all done. I built a successful business. From all external ideals, I definitely was, let's say, killing it, doing great. And I got married, so I should have been happy, right?
Yeah.
Wrong. What happened was I was incredibly stressed. I had unbelievable anxiety. I had married the wrong man because of my strength and capability as a teacher, as a leader, as a podcaster, as a business owner. I was firmly in the masculine polarity because it's the masculine polarity that is dominant in our patriarchal culture, and it's masculine values that are prioritized over feminine values. So many women get into the trap of having to armor up or man up or wear the pants in their life, and it's not who they are. So there's this incredible burden of inauthenticity and heaviness. And that creates burnout, it creates overwhelm, it creates exhaustion. And because I was so firmly in the masculine and so capable of being there, the partner that I attracted was a feminine partner. And so even at home, I ended up being his caretaker, his mommy, doing everything, running the household. There was no point in my life that I was able to rest or relax. And what happened was like probably many listeners, I tend to be a creative human. I mean, I'm an author, an educator. I like to create programs. My creativity just dried up. From 2015 to last year, I created nothing because creativity is feminine. And if you're not in the feminine, if you're not safe and secure and cherished in your femininity, there's very little access to creativity. So all of these things that from the outside looked like incredible success and should, and I'm using air quotes here, have made me happy, were actually burning me out, exhausting me, frustrating me, giving me anxiety, causing depression. I was in a very toxic relationship, trying to tolerate it, trying to put on a brave face for the world. And at some point, I realized this is not who I am. And so that was the dissatisfaction.
Mhm.
And essentially, what happened was, over the last 20 years of studying psychology, spirituality, Eastern mysticism, all the rest, I have been working and teaching and talking about femininity and masculinity. And I think because at its heart, I was so interested in finding out how that worked and how it could free me from these heavy shackles that were put on me by my relationships, my family, my circumstances, my culture, all of that. And I sold my business. I wrote this book. I divorced the husband. I moved across country. And as a result, I have never been more satisfied.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an evolution. What a transformation. Wow.
Yeah.
So, thank you for going through that with
You're
us
welcome.
and your insight about that evolution. So, you have been super creative in the last year. You've been,
Yeah.
running with that creativity.
Mhm.
You are also not just an author and a doctor, but you are also a host of the Spiritual Leadership Podcast. And you've been a host of that podcast since what, 2005? So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So actually, the podcast has been rebranded. It's now the Satisfied Woman podcast.
Okay,
So
great. Okay.
my last business was in the field of yoga and spirituality. And so
Okay.
the podcast that I hosted at the time was the Spiritual Leadership Podcast to incorporate all of the work that I was doing in that business, which was around yoga, astrology, the tarot, the chakras, all of those fun Eastern mystical things. And actually, I have been teaching yoga since the year 2000. I was actually the very first yoga teacher ever, like on the planet, to have a podcast in 2005.
Really?
Yes.
Holy
My
cow.
my boyfriend
Interesting.
at the time came home and he was listening to something and he was like, I'm listening to a podcast. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. I think iPods had just come out. And he told me
Wow.
what it was. And I said, wait a minute, anybody can do one? And he goes, yep. And I marched right upstairs onto my crappy little computer and I produced my first podcast. And I've been podcasting regularly since 2005. As I've grown and evolved, that work and that podcast has grown and evolved. So now it's the Satisfied Woman podcast, but I truly believe in podcasting as a medium to reach people with quality content, and to really neutralize the playing field in terms of the kinds of education we're able to offer people through podcasting.
Yeah, I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
This is a podcast. We've
Yep.
been around for 7 years.
Nice.
This is fantastic. I featured 350 plus women. So
Ah,
I just love what you're doing. It builds community, it safe spaces to tell stories. And that's exactly what you're doing. And
yes.
yes, we rebrand, right?
Yes,
Because we
absolutely.
evolve and
Yeah.
we begin to recreate.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot of that recreating and evolving. So tell us more about the book, The Way of the Satisfied Woman, Reclaiming Feminine Power.
So, like I said, throughout the years of my doctoral work and my studies in psychology, mythology, Eastern mysticism, the thing that really captivated me the most was this idea of masculinity and femininity as a dynamic balance of energy in the universe. It is a psychological energy, really, for us. It's how it presents itself within us as humans. And all of us as individuals have both masculine and feminine energy within us, within our psyches. And we will tend to lean toward one polarity more than another. And we will tend to want to lean toward one polarity more than another. It will be more of our comfort zone, our relaxed space. It's what will make us feel more empowered. And I mean, even in Jungian psychology or depth psychology, it's really founded on this principle of masculinity and femininity within the psyche and how we balance those out and how we manage those. So, what I discovered over the many years of working with this and teaching about it and talking about it and really living it in my own life is that, yes, okay, these are the dynamic opposites of the universe. These are the energetic polarities that exist within us. However, the world we live in is not dynamically oppositional or balanced. And this culture that we live in really skews toward the masculine and really not even in a healthy way, not even in a way that highlights the best of masculinity. What
Mm.
we live in is a patriarchal culture, and it's debatable whether that's been around for 3,000 years or 8,000 years, but let's just say that the patriarchy has had millennia of practice to diminish and devalue femininity for its own gain, and to manipulate and distort even masculinity to try and hold that power and control. So, as I'm exploring this principle and these concepts and living them and seeing how they're going in place in my life, I'm realizing, Summer, that this world was not built for us as feminine women.
Mm.
It just wasn't. It's not our fault. It's actually nobody's fault. We're all just participating and living in this culture that we exist in. And I like to describe it as just improper training. Even our amazing, good masculine partners have not been pulled aside and said, here's what's really precious about masculinity. And our strong women have not been pulled aside and said, hey, look, here's how women are strong. Here's how they shine. Here's the parts of you that you may have hidden or repressed or dismissed because the world has told you that it's not valuable or even that it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw this, I started feeling this, and I felt an increasing amount of pressure to bring this forward and to talk about this and to really center it. And it's one of these times in my life, and I hope that your listeners have had a time like this in their own life. Maybe we call it an epiphany.
Mm-hmm.
But I was eyeballs deep in my yoga and spirituality business. Things were going great. I wanted to talk about this to my audience. I desperately wanted to talk about this to my audience because my audience was women, and I knew how badly they needed it. But
Right.
I kind of pigeonholed myself and niched down in this way, and all they wanted to hear about was yoga, and I appreciate that. But I had plenty of content on yoga, and I really needed to talk about this and bring this forward. So I sold the business, I wrote the book, and I cannot believe the timing of the book being released in November of 2024.
Wow.
That was the month of the election.
Yes.
And no matter what side of the election you're on, and I'm not here to politicize it, what I do know is that as a result, women need this work more than ever. They need us to help them reclaim and recover their own sense of femininity and strength to face whatever it is they're facing right now.
Yeah.
So that's the book.
Well, thank you so much. I
Yeah,
love your explanation of the book, the power of the book. It's perfect timing for this book.
perfect. Yeah.
Perfect. When you said November 2024, I'm like, wow.
I
So
know.
perfect timing.
Yep.
So when we think about the concept of this book,
Uh-huh.
The Way of the Satisfied Woman Reclaiming Feminine Power, and your comment about the world not being really built for us, right?
Yeah.
So how do we fit in? What
Yeah.
is feminine? How do we build around that then?
Hmm.
To find that balance or find that place in our heart, our passion, just to be in this world and find our place, our creativity, all that we can with also encompassing that femininity.
Yeah. Well, as you can imagine, somewhere it's a very complicated answer, which is why I have 70,000 words about it because it's not easy, and I can't sugarcoat it. What I can't do, and I wish I could, is tell your women, oh my gosh, like here's that one trick, right? Here's
Right.
here's your three-step plan to satisfaction as a woman. It's very manifold is the word. There's a lot of layers to this. And the first thing I want to unpack is this idea of satisfaction. So, one of the things that we are indoctrinated into, especially here in America, is this idea of this American dream or success at all costs, and also the DIY nature that we prize so heavily. We really applaud people who've done it themselves, who've pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, who've, created their own thing. They're individuals, they're doing it alone. We love that. It's another mechanism of the patriarchy to exert control. Because when people are alone, when they're separated from others, they're much easier to control. And even more so when your primary polarity is the feminine. Because femininity thrives in connection. It thrives in collaboration. It thrives in communion. It is really propelled by empathy and love. It wants to do the best, not just for herself, but for everyone in her world. And those things are not applauded and centered in our culture. Success often means success at all costs, success to the detriment of others. We climb a ladder up and over people to try to get to the top where others cannot exist with us. So, what I've found in my own pursuit of success, and I was very successful in my own business that I built by myself by pulling myself up from my bootstraps, was how incredibly alone and isolated I was. So I would say the first big mental shift we can make as women is to decenter this idea of success, because it really is based on masculine principles and values. And again, not even the best masculine principles and values. Like masculinity at its best, it loves leadership, it loves direction, it loves guidance, accomplishment. And these are all beautiful qualities, but when they're skewed and distorted, they turn into power and control. So let's just let that go. And instead, let's pursue satisfaction. When I discovered the real definition of satisfaction, it blew my mind. Because I was, working with the literature and the history and all this and doing all the research. And amazingly, or maybe not amazingly, books like this have been written for men. Men are doing this work to reclaim and recover their masculinity, and I can't applaud them enough.
Right.
There haven't really been many books like this for women.
Yeah.
So I took one of the foremost books like this for men called The Way of the Superior Man, which was written about 30 years ago. And it is a great book. Look, it was 30 years ago, so it needs some updates, but it's a great book. And I thought, I don't need to create superior women. Superiority is not a feminine ideal. What's my juxtaposition? The word satisfied means, ready for this? This is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. It is the pleasure derived from the fulfillment of your wishes and needs. The pleasure derived from the fulfillment of your wishes and needs. So it's not linear, it's holistic. Pleasure is absolutely a feminine principle. Femininity feels pleasure through her body. When we feel pleasure, we feel it because we're safe, we're secure, we trust ourselves and the world around us, we're cherished. Pleasure unlocks all the good things for a feminine woman from the inside out. And it comes from the fulfillment, meaning that kind of constant evolution, that constant aggregation, that constant development, even that circular process of working with and manifesting our wishes and our needs. Now, every human on the planet must have their needs met. If we're not getting our needs met, there is no joy. But our wishes are what create meaning in our life, and everyone desires meaning.
Yeah.
So rather than pursue this linear idea of success where there's this goalpost, then if you achieve that goalpost, you either feel unfulfilled or you just move the goalpost. That's solitary, that's individual, that's alone, that's at all costs. I'm encouraging women to pursue satisfaction instead, because that's going to get them in touch with what's most important to them as feminine beings. It's going to allow them to evolve, and it's going to allow them to create joy and pleasure for all those around them, because a woman is not happy if the ones she loves around her are also not happy. So a woman's satisfaction, joy, and pleasure equals the joy, satisfaction, and the pleasure of those around her.
Mm. Well, that's a lot. That's extremely deep. And there's
Yeah.
so much that could be culled out of that. We can have multiple conversations about femininity, about satisfaction,
Mm-hmm.
about conditioning,
Yeah.
about so much here. That book is so important, not just for women, but for a man as well,
Yes.
to better understand our
Yes.
femininity and how we not just reclaim it or fight for it or regain it, develop it,
Yeah.
feel it.
And center it, value it.
I love that word value.
Mm-hmm.
So value it, but I think there could be some confusion about what are your values versus what do you value as a woman and yourself,
Mm.
and that separation, because what we value could be based on conditioning.
Yeah, it could be. That's true. So there's a lot of examination required.
Yes.
And I do work through that with the readers of the book or those who join me on my website to do the work with me in my communities. We have to really examine what we've been taught and question whether it works for us. And actually, this is another point, questioning this idea of inquisition, and I'm trying to take that word back, by the way, the inquisition. Inquisition is inherently feminine. The feminine is questioning all of the time because the feminine is like the canary in the coal mine. The feminine is going to feel first a sense of discomfort. when something isn't okay in her environment. And it's not logical. It doesn't have to be explained. We don't need reasons why. But that sense of discomfort is what starts the questioning and actually what eventually creates a course correction for her and everyone around her. And you know, Summer, as a woman, and all the women listening, you know that when you have that sense of discomfort, that question, nothing is going to shake it until you get your answer. You
Yeah.
cannot let it go. And people around you might say, oh, you're being illogical. You're being irrational. They'll try to talk you out of it. They'll try to dismiss you. They might even call you crazy. I don't know a single woman anywhere who hasn't at some point in her life been called crazy, even by someone who loves her. Because again, another way to diminish and dismiss the feminine and devalue the feminine is to not acknowledge the power of her intuition and her emotional depth. And the two superpowers of femininity are intuition and emotional depth.
Yes.
And so when a woman's intuition is kicking up, saying, something's not right here, this doesn't feel right, the most important thing, the first thing to do is for that woman to listen.
Yeah. I love that second part, to act
Yeah.
upon it. And I really like the fact that we're talking about listening to our intuition, number
Yeah.
one, and also that part of us that is emotional, because I think there are a lot of people, because of their own conditioning, that try to dismiss emotions, think it's too woo-woo, or try to gaslight us.
Yes.
And then by what you said, keep us away from our communities
Mm-hmm.
where we're isolated,
Mm-hmm.
we're more easily controlled.
Absolutely.
Dr. Susan David came up with this book. It's called Emotional Agility.
Oh.
And I absolutely love this. I speak about this all the time because I think a lot of times we have to get back to basics just as human beings, and identifying our own emotion,
Mm-hmm.
putting a name to it, doing all these different things. And so, with that said, I think that emotional agility helps us regain not just that identity, but that understanding of the I. Who am I?
Absolutely.
Or that femininity. So thank you so much. I love this conversation. We can go down so many roads. I am so interested. I was so excited to talk to you because this is so interesting. The book, the podcast, your evolution, your own story, and how you help others in community.
Mm-hmm.
You do have a large community. Where can people find support? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so the best place to start is my website, thesatisfiedwoman.com. And for all the listeners of the podcast, I have a special page for you to get you a starter kit on your road to satisfaction, where you can find it at thesatisfiedwoman.com/empowerme. So if you head over to thesatisfiedwoman.com/empowerme, you'll get a free chapter of my book, I think a video of me talking about femininity, and a quiz to determine whether you're on the feminine polarity or not. I have a free app, and that's primarily where my community members exist and communicate, is through the app. So the Satisfied Woman app. And then I also have a host of courses to help women dive deeper and unpack some of these elements that are holding us back from our satisfaction. A big one that women ask about and talk about is relationship, whether it's that they have to identify if they're in a toxic relationship and try to either get out of it or change those toxic patterns, or to find the right kind of masculine partner in relationship. So I've got lots and lots of resources in the blog and the podcast and everything on the website.
Fantastic. As we come to the close of the interview, if you could leave the listeners with one tip about starting their journey back to femininity, what would that practical step be?
The practical step would be to start listening to your intuition without fail and heed it, act upon it. Don't question it. It doesn't have to be logical. When it comes up, it's like the voices of your foremothers coming through history, through time, through their experiences to talk to you. So that's incredible wisdom, and it's yours. Listen.
Thank you so much, Alanna, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today. You can follow Dr. Alanna Kaivalya on YouTube at The Satisfied Woman, and you can find her book on Amazon, and you can also reach out to her at her website, which is thesatisfiedwoman.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a core women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.